Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for the first MGF webinar, aimed to share industry best practice and promote thought leadership in the construction industry. We hope that this series fills the void that event cancellations have brought, as well as providing an opportunity to encourage conversations between companies to keep everybody safe at work. For those that don't know, MGF are a privately owned company, fast approaching 40 years in the temporary works industry. Our primary focus is a provision of a comprehensive temporary work solution service using wholly in-house resources. Recognised as one of the leaders in the design, manufacture and provision of modular and bespoke excavation support systems, we're committed to providing our customers with complete engineered solutions and promoting best practice for all types of excavation works, with safety, piling and lifting departments to support. Our latest development is a branch into the Structural Support Solutions division, offering a comprehensive propping solution that is less intrusive, minimises programme time and risk, whilst ensuring the integrity of the supported structure is maintained. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to ask questions which we'll go through at the end. There is a question box to the right of your screen whilst you're not in full screen mode. And for this, you do need a Gmail or Google account, but that's really easy and quick to set up. Alternatively, you can send your emails through to marketing@mgf.co.uk. So let's get started. Today, we're joined by our Regional Engineering Manager, Rob Eagles, and National Key Account and Engineering Manager, Owaiz Khan. So I'll hand over to Rob, and I hope everybody enjoys.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Rob Eagles, the Regional Engineering Manager. Just a quick career profile. So I've spent 14 years in the industry, 7 of those delivering projects with Balfour Beatty, and the last 7 years in temporary works design with MGF. I'm a passionate and professional civil engineer looking to make a positive impact on society. A mantra I've been using in recent lunch and learn sessions is let's make temporary works a forethought. And in terms of a goal for today, let's engage with a wide audience, leave you with some discussion points and begin to change the mindsets about early engagement. I'm going to hand you over to Owaiz now.
Thanks very much, Rob. Good morning everyone, hope you're all safe and well. My name's Owaiz Khan. I'm the National Key Account and Engineering Manager at MGF. So I've been at MGF for 17 years now, man and boy, where I've gained valuable knowledge and experience in temporary works, working across various different sectors. Been really lucky to have worked on projects like the London Olympics, various AMP programmes and now HS2. Similar to Rob, I'm extremely enthusiastic about shared learning, demonstrating this through case studies and lessons learned, and using my knowledge and experience of temporary works to add value to projects. Over the next few slides, I'm going to be talking about some of the changes that have occurred in the temporary works arena over the last few years and the impact of not considering temporary works at an early stage. So if we rewind the clock back 10 to 15 years ago, what I witnessed working as a temporary works designer, that there was a vast improvement on how temporary works was dealt with. Examples of this are as follows. So we saw an increase in Tier 1 contractors employing and utilising their own temporary works departments, which led to benefits, particularly on design and build schemes. We saw more detailed temporary works involvement at tender stage. The revision of the Construction Design and Management Regulations, CDM, in 2007, which focused on improving planning and management. More and more self-delivery of projects with a skilled workforce. This workforce then had increased experience, knowledge and training and overall appreciation of temporary works. Definitely saw the role of the TWC, the Temporary Works Coordinator, becoming more prominent. And then finally, in 2010, we saw the formation of the Temporary Works Forum, the TWF, in the UK. The purpose of the TWF is to increase awareness and sharing of temporary works knowledge. There are initially 15 founding member companies, which has now increased to well over 200 member companies across different countries. If we fast forward to the present day, what we're seeing at MGF is projects are more commercially led, reduced margins and increased competitiveness, and this begs the question, given the current climate, will margins be tighter due to COVID, Brexit, etc.? We're seeing more and more internal temporary works departments have to be self-sufficient and profitable. More and more compressed site teams, wider use of BIM to provide a common language, improve overall communication, more and more work is being subcontracted out, reduction in self-delivery, and what we're also seeing, particularly on projects like HS2, more joint ventures, which means sharing of knowledge, but also sharing the risk. And arguably, the supply chain are now perhaps further away from the principal contractor and the principal designer. So some food for thought. Temporary works is the first thing that's required on a project, but usually the last thing that's thought about. When this is the case, as unfortunately we often still see, this can lead to the following. So inadequate planning, limited design information, such as insufficient information on the design briefs, which leads to inaccurate designs, excessive rework percentages, commercial pressures, poor communication between the various stakeholders, and overall, the factors above can have a significant impact on the buildability of the permanent works. Some of the consequences of all this are an increase in cost for all parties, where a conservative approach can lead to increased footprint of the excavation, more shoring is required, more concrete required, more mud shift, etc. Requests for further information at the latter stages of the process. This can then lead to delays, frustration, etc. Less time for value engineering and optioneering, but above all, health and safety is potentially being compromised, which then in turn reduces the possibility of designing out risks and communicating any residual risks to the project teams. Just a few other considerations as we move forward. Considering temporary works within the project's budget, there's many occasions where temporary works wasn't considered or hasn't been considered at tender of the pre-construction phase. Contractors are winning work with little or no consideration of temporary works on occasion. When this happens, the site team may improvise, increasing risk, and potentially the cost of getting the temporary works right comes off the bottom line. The role of the temporary works coordinator with a reduction in the site teams perhaps leads to more pressure on the temporary works coordinator, where there could be various elements of complex temporary works occurring simultaneously. Quite topical at the moment, and certainly something we should improve on as an industry. The increased collaboration between the temporary works coordinator, temporary works designer, principal designer, permanent works designer, and the principal contractor. Been watching quite a few ICE webinars on the GIRI, the Getting It Right initiative. So an interesting statistic that it's estimated in the UK, £100 billion is spent per annum in the construction industry. 21% of this is spent on rectifying errors. More importantly, 37% of accidents occur during this rework, so plenty of food for thought there. I'm now going to hand over to Rob, who will discuss when temporary work should be considered and the real benefits of early engagement, demonstrating this via some case studies. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Owaiz. So looking at when temporary work should be considered, I've broken it into 3 distinct periods of the project life cycle. So first, and ideally at the development stage, so during the design of the permanent works, the buildability, inclusive of the temporary works and the construction sequence, should be a consideration. Also at this stage, we're seeing an increased client expectation for temporary works to be considered, which is promising and also good for the industry. Alternatively, and secondly, the tender phase. So temporary works is normally a pricing item during the tender phase. A detailed consideration at this stage will provide a realistic upfront cost. In addition, early stage work can be included within a tender, which can demonstrate a responsibility to the overall client. Thirdly, the project handover. So when estimating handover to the delivery team, they should also pass over a temporary works register, which ties into the construction programme. So based on our experience with early involvement, we can create win-win situations when temporary works is considered at the earliest opportunity. So what is the role of the temporary works designer in this? It's to accurately understand the the requirements, and also the methodologies provided in the design brief, including things such as the location and details. So where is the excavation and who's the temporary works coordinator for the project? Looking at the scope of works, what is being built, repaired or investigated? The hazards, so what hazards are surrounding or in the surrounding environment? And then looking at the residual risks. So have we identified anything from the permanent works designer that they've passed over? Site investigation reports, what SI is available and is it in the right proximity to the excavation for us to carry it through? As temporary works designers, we should be considering alternatives to get the best result possible. So can the amount of temporary works potentially be reduced or even designed out? And what are the sustainable benefits? So if we consider alternatives, we can potentially reduce things such as overheads, transport, and weekly hire costs. And then looking at engineered solutions, we need to take all the information that's available and turn this into a risk-managed, practical and feasible engineered solution. Next, I'm going to show a case study, which is an animation. It's going to demonstrate how considering alternatives can have a positive impact on a project. This is an animation that we've produced internally by the MGF Research and Development Department. So the purpose of this scheme was to install 2 lines of culverts in a canal cut environment. So a temporary works design was already in place with a 2-in-1 vertical batter. Some hazards was identified, including a gas station, and they also wanted to site a crane there. The customer had proposed to MGF installing 2 levels of frame flying across the canal, with the lower frame removed after a base had been cast, so that the culverts could be situated beneath the top frame. We proposed a different solution, looking at reducing the amount of temporary works required. That was installing the secondary line of culverts first, before installing the temporary works. Then using the permanent works to actually backprop off the line of culverts. Then running the other line up to the temporary works. Once we got to that point, we started a staged installation sequence where we installed a shorter strut against the culverts. And as you can see, we removed the initial struts as we went through. Repeating this sequence until the end. Once the final initial strut was removed, they could then install the final line of culverts, or the final few culverts, before backfilling and removing the temporary works. So that was just an example. That was an example of how we can reduce the amount of temporary works equipment. So now looking at the skill set, knowledge and experience required to deliver excellent engineered solutions. So first and foremost, it's the engineering principles. It's understanding the engineering principles, theory, and the software that we input into, but also having the ability to be a practical engineer. We need to be able to communicate in a number of different forms, but most importantly, for me, it's being able to pick up the phone and have a conversation. We need to understand construction sequences. As without site experience, it's difficult, and that requires temporary works engineers to possibly call on some of their colleagues or others to discuss these construction sequences. Alternatively, we can develop it through short site placements or secondments. Then we look at engineering judgments, and this is the judgment to be able to make a kind of considered engineered decision whilst managing risk. We need to identify hazards and risks and apply the general principles of prevention, and also understand our duties as a designer under the CDM regs. They need to have a sustainable approach and an awareness of sustainable impact of the decisions that they make. So with the 3 pillars of sustainability: economic, environmental, and social. They also need to have a holistic view. They need to evaluate the full scope of the project, and sometimes that may fall outside of the design brief. And then in terms of continual development, we need people to continually develop their own skills and knowledge and align that with what's going on in the industry, including kind of innovation and looking at that too. So going back to what Owaiz mentioned earlier, so it's the first thing required and the last thing thought about. So within Temporary Works, we're looking to change this through early engagement. So value engineering solutions, as a business and individuals, we're advocates of providing value engineered solutions. We do this through collaboration by working together to achieve the best results for everyone. We can offer advice and guidance, and that's based on the extensive knowledge that we've got in ground shoring. We may have done something slightly differently in the past, which we can use now, and which has worked for us then. Looking at industry innovations, so we may suggest something that's an alternative that you've not thought about before that we now know about and we can utilise. And then in terms of hazard identification, we can identify the hazards early on and think about how we can mitigate them through the design phase. In terms of reuse opportunities, we can combine elements of Temporary Works and offer reuse opportunities based on the programme. So what's the benefits of early engagement? First and foremost, it's the time, and that's the time to think, discuss, and put some options forward prior to full scheme design. You can have pre-prepared Temporary Works designs, which means everything's in place before commencing on site. And as mentioned in the previous slide, we can design out the risks or mitigate the risks during the design phase and incorporate whatever's left over into your risk assessments and method statements. We then look at cost reduction, and this is a potential to save money, tying it back into kind of value engineered solutions. And also potential for program acceleration. So this, early engagement and the program acceleration directly links to overheads and also the kind of completion dates for the project. And then looking at pressure removal. So this removes pressure from the Temporary Works coordinator, the Temporary Works designer, the Temporary Works checker, some external checking departments, and also logistically for us to be able to get you the Temporary Works equipment to site. Also, one of the benefits, or the last benefit, is the accurate upfront costing that you're going to get, which is also can be good for forecasting period spends and the likes. So now we're going to look at a case study, and that case study was Davyhulme Wastewater Treatment Works, which was a scheme for a client, United Utilities, in 2005, 2016. So it's a few years ago now. And this was delivered outside of the AMP programme as a standalone project. This was a modernisation of the existing wastewater treatment work, and it was a project based in the northwest of England. It was a £200 million project cost, and it was procured through the IEng MICE Red Book, which is fixed price. By being fixed price, that means that the principal contractor can increase margin through things such as value engineering. They get a cost saving. And this customer in particular engaged early with us, so a number of items was identified on the Temporary Works register. And the initial inquiry, or the first inquiry that we got through, was for the distribution chamber 2. Distribution chamber 2, the customer requested a conceptual design based on fairly limited information from the outset of a design brief, one borehole and a few hand-picked drawings. So the design was for a concrete box structure, which was 9.3 metres deep, with a plan size of 12.5 metres square, so quite a vast structure. There was a 3.6 metre diameter pipe that came from underneath the structure and into that little notch that you can just see on the upper level there. So we provided an outline design based on the information that we had at the time. But in terms of collaboration, we requested a meeting with the customer, and that was to discuss the scheme further. So we sat down with the site team and also the commercial team to review the design. At that review meeting, they asked us to consider additional working room at 16.4 metres squared. That was to accommodate formwork and also some access and egress locations. Before the meeting ended, I actually asked the customer if we could have some additional information, and with that, I took away the Revit model, the full drawing package, and also the SI report, which was really beneficial and allowed us to look at some alternatives. So I suppose in line with what I've spoken about a little earlier, I considered some alternatives and for a value engineered solution. On the bottom right hand side there, you'll see the plan, which was the proposed distribution chamber. The suggestion I made was to house the 3.6 metre diameter pipework in a smaller, lower cofferdam, whilst also raising the base of the main excavation by 6.2 metres. So you can just make out there the pipework, which is surrounded by a mass concrete infill. And just to give you an idea, that plan area was 182 square metres. So in terms of the economic saving, looking at that plan area of 182 square metres and the savings involved, that equated to just over 1,100 metres cubed, which when you look at the muck away and the mass concrete of savings, that equated to just over £116,000, although that doesn't account for the redesign of the permanent works, which would somewhat reduce that figure. In terms of environmental savings, there was reduced material to landfill and also a decrease in CO2 emissions. And then there was other benefits such as a programme, a time saving for the customer without that material to excavate and concrete. There was a saving there. And then looking at health and safety, which, as Owaiz mentioned a little earlier, is obviously high on the agenda and of importance. There was reduced plant movements on site. There was also reduced transport movements with things being delivered to site and being taken away from site. And then also there was a reduction in concrete works, so the amount of time that site operatives was actually having to spend dealing with concrete and the hazards that brings with it. So lastly, I'm going to just show you a few of the drawings that we would produce as a typical drawing in one of our design packages, which is the 3 drawings that you can see there with the 3D models. And then also just in the bottom right hand corner, that was the last picture that I took from my site visits just before the chamber got built. From that point, and we was able to remove the temporary works. I'm now going to hand over to Emma, who's going to do the close and any questions, and we might be able to field them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both Rob and Owaiz. Apologies if there were some issues with the sound throughout that. We'll be sending out a feedback form at the end of this, and I'd like to ask everybody to fill that in with as much detail as possible to help us improve future webinars. As a bit of an encouragement for you to fill this survey in, we're going to offer a free prize draw to win a £50 Amazon voucher. We're running these webinars on a monthly schedule, and our next one is booked in for Wednesday the 18th of November at 11 o'clock. The topic for discussion is the temporary works innovation in the rail sector, and will be hosted by our rail sector manager Mark Norton and senior engineer Ben Gorrell. We hope that you'll join us for this and any future webinars, and you can find more details on all of these on our website. If there's anything further you'd like to discuss, please email it to marketing@mgf.co.uk, and we'll now take some questions. So first question we've got is, on a design and build contract, it's common to be finalising the design whilst construction has started. How does this affect early engagement? Rob?
Thanks, Emma. So yeah, design and build. I suppose that's a little bit different to the standard form of contract. So as you said, the kind of often finalising the design whilst the construction has started. I'd see this as potentially an opportunity to collaborate with the permanent works designer, as it's still what we'd classify as the development stage. Also, I think the other thing is we can work off prelim drawings. So, you know, as the permanent works designers actually putting these together, we could be looking at the prelim drawings and giving some kind of outline designs. Thanks.
So is there any variation with the levels of early engagement depending on the sector? Owaiz, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. What we see is definitely a variation across the different sectors. So when we're looking at planned works for the water, highways and rail sectors in particular, the level of information, communication is definitely much better compared to some of the other sectors. The one challenge that we have is the repair and maintenance type contracts, emergency repair work, where information is limited. So what's really helpful here is having an understanding of the history of the site, using facilities like BGS to extract historical borehole information, and as much information as possible, surveys on services, photographs, details of existing buildings, etc. So to answer the question, yeah, it definitely varies from sector to sector. Thanks, Emma.
So you also mentioned about compressed site teams within the history. Is there any particular reason for this, Rob?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned reduced margins within the presentation, and I suppose reducing the overheads with staff levels would be one reason for that. I think also I'd say companies are expecting staff to do more within their own role, which does give them additional responsibility early on in the career, which can be a good thing. It can be a good thing. So yeah, that's what I would answer that one. I think. Thanks very much.
And the final question we've got is, what rework percentages do you see within MGF as a business, Owaiz?
So as a business, overall, our what we call our revision percentage rate is about 40%. So for every 100 designs that we get, 40 will change for some reason or another. Vary the reasons for these changes, but one kind of root cause, the common root cause, is probably lack of communication. So there's other factors like Rob mentioned, lack of SI, insufficient information provided to the designers, incomplete design briefs. But yeah, generally kind of improved communication is definitely going to help us all. Thanks, Emma.
So finally, I'd just like to thank both Rob and Owaiz for the content and volunteering to present our first webinar, and also to everyone at MGF who has made this possible. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope everybody stays safe.